100. That is Norway's refugee quota, in the country with $340,000 in sovereign wealth per citizen. That number is not a limit, it is a verdict. Norway ranks as the wealthiest welfare state on Earth. Its sovereign wealth fund, the Government Pension Fund Global, held 21,300 billion Norwegian kroner at the end of 2025. Nearly 4 times GDP, over $340,000 for every registered person in the country. And yet, in December 2025, Prime Minister Jonas Gahr Støre set the refugee resettlement quota at 100 per year. 100. And on March 27, 2026, his Labour government signed a regulation excluding Ukrainian men aged 18 to 60 from collective protection. Effective immediately. Not a populist, not a nationalist, a Labour Prime Minister running the world's largest sovereign wealth fund. Telling men fleeing a war that NATO is funding to go back and fight it. This wasn't cruelty. This wasn't xenophobia. It was a calculation. And Norway has been running it for 50 years. How did that system get built? That answer starts at a border crossing in the Arctic. After the oil boom of the 1970s, Norway faced a choice. Distribute the wealth broadly through a universal welfare state, or accumulate it in a sovereign fund for future generations. They chose both. And at the time, there were reasons. The oil would run out. The population was aging. The welfare state needed a permanent funding base. For a while, it worked. The Government Pension Fund Global became the largest sovereign wealth fund in the world. The welfare state became one of the most generous on Earth. Norway built a labor market so demanding, high wages, high skill requirements, strong union structures, that it effectively filtered who could participate in it. Then in the autumn of 2015, that filter was tested. Between August and October, an estimated 5,500 to 10,800 migrants, mostly from Syria, arrived at Storskog, the only land border between Norway and Russia. They came on bicycles, not on foot, because Russian law prohibits pedestrian crossings. Not by car, because Norway penalizes drivers who transport undocumented passengers. A legal loophole. Discovered. Exploited at scale. The number doubled every week. Norway's response was not a parliamentary debate. Construction of a steel barrier began in September 2016. 200 meters long, 3.5 meters high. An agreement locked in that Russian border control would not allow crossings without proper Norwegian visas. And then, in December 2023, the Norwegian Police Security Service revealed what Storskog had actually been. And in December 2025, Støre announced the plan for Norway, a cascade of immigration restrictions framed explicitly as national security policy. Higher income thresholds for family reunification, mandatory integration declaration, stricter language requirements for permanent residency, a step-down welfare mechanism reducing support after 1 year and again after 3. In the refugee quota, 100, minimum, per year. Norway is not building a wall, it is building a filter, calibrated with 50 years of data on who integrates, who works, and what it costs when they don't. But if Norway can afford anyone, why is the quota set at 100? That answer is not in the budget. It is in the labor market, and the labor market number is more precise than any politician will say out loud. Here's how the filter works. Norway's welfare state is not funded by oil money directly. It is funded by labor, employment rates, tax receipts, contributions. The oil fund is a buffer, not a subsidy for structural welfare deficits. Norway's labor market is among the most demanding in the world. Minimum salaries for work permits in 2026 599,200 Norwegian kroner per year for master's level roles, 522,600 Norwegian kroner for bachelor's level. These are not aspirational. They are the threshold below which UDI, the immigration authority, will reject a permit application outright. The economy that funds the welfare state requires a specific kind of worker. Educated, Norwegian-speaking, economically self-sufficient within a short time frame. So far, this is a story about a welfare state running a labor market calculation. Since autumn 2025, too many have arrived in Norway, especially young men. Norway has already received the highest number of Ukrainians in the Nordic region, and Norwegian municipalities report pressure on services and a shortage of housing. We also believe it is important that as many as possible remain in Ukraine to contribute to the defense effort. Too many. In the country with $340,000 per citizen in sovereign wealth, Norway contributed over 15 billion kroner to Ukraine's defense. It funds the war, and then it tells the men fleeing conscription in that war, go back. The calculation is not fiscal, it is strategic. Migration flows can be weaponized. Storskog proved that. Military-age men at a border with Russia are a security variable, not just a humanitarian one. To understand what that means, compare it to Sweden. Same Nordic welfare state, same demographic pressure, same EU migration framework. Completely different method. Sweden offered departing migrants up to $34,000 in a lump sum. Norway sends you the bill for your deportation. Both arrive at the same destination, fewer people in the system. The method changes. The mathematics do not. This is the fortress consensus. Not Wilders, not Orban, not a crisis, a Labour Prime Minister, a $2 trillion fund, and the honest acknowledgement that a welfare state is a finite resource, and that managing who can access it is not cruelty. It is governance. Fridtjof Nansen invented the modern refugee travel document in 1922. That was a Norwegian creation, the foundation of the international refugee system. The country that built the architecture of international refugee protection is now designing the architecture of its precise circumvention. Prime Minister Støre confirmed Norway remains open to EU proposals for return centers outside Europe entirely. Today, Norway operates a system that didn't exist in this precise form a decade ago. None of this is temporary. All of it is structural. The plan for Norway commits to this architecture through 2029 and beyond, with annual reviews that allow the government to tighten further as conditions change. And Norway is not alone. Germany restricted asylum processing. The Netherlands is spending €1 billion a year on a dysfunctional system it refuses to reform. Finland closed its border to bicycle crossings and built a legal framework every EU member state is now studying. Poland suspended international refugee law at a border where a soldier was killed. Each country provides legal cover for the next. Each decision normalizes the one that follows. The cause is a single calculation, that the welfare state is a closed system. That sustainability requires active management of who can access it, and that the state has both the right and the responsibility to enforce that management with precision. Until that logic is challenged at the European level, the filter will keep running, and the quota will stay at 100. Norway's problem is not immigration. It is a welfare state so precisely designed that it can only function if the inputs are controlled, and a security apparatus so attuned to hybrid threats that it reads every migration flow as a potential variable. 100 refugees per year. That number started this. That number ends it. In a typical year at Storskog, between 0 and 10 asylum seekers cross. That is not geography. That is not luck. That is 50 years of institutional memory, producing exactly the result it was designed to produce. Every democracy in Europe is watching, not to see what happens next, to see if the arithmetic holds.